Yay, I think we did it. I think we're officially live. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can. Okay, first time using this StreamYard, so I'm gonna change the background. Look how fancy. Hello to our one live viewer.
Hello, live viewers. Thank you for being here.
This is so exciting. I'm like, I need to figure out how to do all of this technology and then talk at the same time. I think like a set it and forget it kind of mentality.
Like let the technology do its thing and just be in the zone.
Right. I think that is what we're gonna have to do. My dad
Yeah.
does these all the time and he's like all with the buttons. I'm like, you're so fancy. I gotta figure this out.
Mhm. Yeah, I feel like a news broadcaster. Like anything I say is
That's
gonna
a
be out there.
for real. I mean, that's what quarantine allows us to do, right? It's like
Yeah.
now we're all internet famous, I think.
Oh yeah.
Or we can at least pretend we can have fancy live broadcasts even if nobody's listening.
The one is, but yeah.
Yeah, we have three now. We have three listeners.
Oh, awesome,
Our
awesome.
three listeners, shout out. Hey, if you're listening, send us a comment so that we know that you're listening because we can put it up on the screen, which is fancy. So I'm excited to try that out. So yeah, if you're listening, put a comment, even just say hi so that we can see that it is being received.
Yes.
Okay, so let's go over to these banners. So let's hop in, shall we?
Let's start.
I'm pumped. Okay, I'm gonna pull up this fancy banner that is gonna let our listeners know what we are doing here. So let's just start with the purpose of today. So, P.S. I'm Rachel. This is Katie. If you don't know who we are, so hello, welcome to our live broadcast. So I have a podcast called Aspiring Artist Podcast, and I actually found Katie on TikTok and was like, dude, you have to come on my show. And then I learned that she also has a podcast.
Yes, I have a podcast called Katie Talks a Lot Podcast, and I talk about my move to New York City, acting, and being self-employed.
Yeah. So when Katie came on my show, we had so much fun just talking about self-employment and like going to college for the arts and not exactly knowing what we want to do after college. And so we figured that we could hop on here and just like continue that conversation in a more interactive way.
Yes. Yeah, it's crazy. We have so much in common, and TikTok brought us together.
Bless TikTok. Honestly, all my friends who are like, TikTok is for children. I'm like, you know what? Forget it.
Your loss.
You're lost. There's like way too many. I spend way too many hours on TikTok. It is, but it's so much fun. And I feel like now there's just so many more people on there and so many interesting creative people on there too.
Yeah.
It's so much fun. So, for anybody who is listening, just know that at any point, if you have questions, go ahead and chime in. We can view your comments live and we can respond to them live. So, if you're listening, feel free to say hey in the comments and we can literally put your comments up on the screen so that we can talk with you guys, which is the whole point of going live, is we really want to be very interactive today. So, why don't we just start with a little bit of background? And Katie, why don't you go first since this is being broadcast to my page? My people probably are like, "Don't talk about yourself." Let's hear about Katie.
Okay, so my name is Katie, and I was kind of just like typical theater geek. I ended up going to college for theater, and then I graduated with a theater degree and absolutely no job prospects. Didn't even know what freelancing was, didn't know what self-employment was. And then about 3 months after that, I realized that you can make money online with voiceover. So I started growing this business, and then I started editing podcasts. And then about 8 months of growing my business, I moved to New York City, where my business has just grown and grown and grown. And the last few months, I've been able to quit my catering jobs, my babysitting jobs, and just put everything into this online business. So I'm super passionate about making online. I think it is super doable. And I think now more than ever, it's something that we should all get on board and realize that if you have a skill, if you have a passion, if you want to work for yourself, it really is doable. So I'm super, super passionate about being self-employed and also voice acting. So that's my thing.
Yay! Are you back in New York now?
Yes. So you might be able to hear the music outside. And they just started blowing up fireworks, like every single night, fireworks. It's been crazy.
So, what's it like being back? Because you were gone and with quarantine, like, is it still crazy in the city, like lots of people, or what?
It's definitely less people. I mean, usually there's so many tourists in the summer, so I can tell that everyone who's here now, like, really just lives here. There's no visitors. Everyone's wearing a mask for the most part, but I thought it was going to be like all dreary and depressing, but I would say people are really carrying on with their lives. It's just there's no tourists, businesses are closed, and everyone is wearing a mask.
Oh, yeah, that's honestly great to hear, especially in a city like New York. I feel like people are really going to have to be much more careful there because the spread is just like inevitable, right?
Yes. Yeah, New York is never going to die, I don't think. I think we're definitely going to pull through this.
Yeah, an amazing place to just be a creative person. And it's amazing that you were able to finally make it back there after what, like 2 months back home?
I spent 3 months with my parents, who I love dearly, but I was ready to get back to my adult life.
Yeah.
But Rachel, I want to know all about you, your background. I want to know about high school, college, and how you have started this podcast and have started being self-employed.
Oh my gosh, yes, the works. So I'm like one of those weirdos who, like, in ninth grade, I was like, I know exactly what I want to do with my life, and then I did it. Um, so I I was like your typical choir and theater kid growing up. And ninth grade, I can literally tell you the moment that I decided I was going to do some sort of music for the rest of my life. I was actually in eighth grade, not ninth grade. I was in eighth grade and I was invited to audition for the audition only choir at my high school. And I remember going to the audition as an eighth grader, and we all had to sing this a cappella piece. And everyone started singing, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever heard. I stopped singing and I was literally tearing up. And I was like, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever heard. I want to do this. And I spent the next 4 years like really investing in choir and theater and voice lessons. And I just kind of decided that I was going to go to school for music and music would be my path. So I did an undergraduate degree in vocal performance, then took a gap year teaching some lessons, decided I wanted. Did I freeze? Are we back?
You froze for a little bit. Now you're
Oh,
back.
computer. Okay, guys, technology problems are real.
You're on a roll though. So you took a gap year.
Yeah, I took a gap year and I was teaching some private lessons and auditioning for grad school. I wasn't sure if I was going to go back to school or not. Ended up going back to school. And while in school, I was going to school like 40 hours a week. And then I was simultaneously working about 40 hours a week, teaching voice and piano lessons and traveling all over the place. And I think that's where I learned about time management. And when I was finished with graduate school, everything seemed so much easier because I wasn't in school 40 hours a week in addition to whatever I was doing. And I think that really helped like my mindset, because I was like, if I can do this 80 hours a week and be successful, now I only have to do it 40 hours a week or maybe 50. And even if 50 hours is a lot to work, right? But it's less than 80. So that was nice.
Yeah.
Like a nice break. So so I graduated from graduate school and I just kind of started teaching. And it's so funny. I was having a conversation with my friend Madeline, who I also have on the podcast. I was talking to her last night about the trajectory of, what I want my future to look like. And I was basically saying that summer is the time that I usually reevaluate everything. And I think every single summer since 2015, I've done that, because summer is a great time to refresh. Because your students go out of town, or they stop lessons for the summer, or whatever the case may be. And every year my summer goal has looked slightly different. Like one year it was just to get students. And then the next year it was to organize my schedule better. And then it was to travel less and have more students at home. This year, the goal is to continue thriving with some sort of online business and figure out how can I keep things online post quarantine, because that's going to be really interesting.
Yes. And then when did you decide you want a podcast?
Oh, yeah, the podcast. Okay, so this was totally like a random quarantine project for me. My dad called me up. My dad is a podcaster, and he called me up and he was like, "So when are you starting a podcast?" And I was like, "What do you mean? I'm not doing a podcast." And he's like, "Well, you totally should." And I was like, "But what would I do a podcast on? Like vocal pedagogy?" There are plenty of people in the world who are interested in vocal pedagogy, but I wasn't certain that would make for a great podcast. And I kind of got to thinking, like, what am I passionate about that I could speak a lot about, that I could have guests on? And I just decided that instead of making it a music specific podcast, I would make it a show where I just brought creative people together, because I've always really seemed to love networking and meeting new people. And what better way to do that than to merge the different disciplines of the arts together, which is something that really does not get done. Like, I mean, in what world would we have connected otherwise? And it's not like you're even that much out of the realm of what I do, right? I mean, you as a voice actor and an actress, and me as a musician and teacher who works with musical theater, but there's not enough overlap that we ever would have met otherwise.
Yeah, totally. It's a really good way to like meet people who are kind of doing the same thing as you, but like totally different. And it seems like you have like a lot of really interesting guests coming on. And I like too that you've been interviewing people about like their artistry, but also like how they make money, how you survive in this like modern age that we're in right now.
Totally. I mean, the thing about being an artist that it's not only about doing your art. I mean, you could be the most talented person in the universe, but if you don't have the resources or the know-how, you could completely, I don't want to say put your talent to waste, but almost like miss out on a ton of opportunities because you don't really have that business savvy.
Yeah, you need to have both for sure.
Yeah. So it's been really fun to bring people together. So why don't we talk a little bit just about self-employment and the pros and the cons? I love your self-employment story. Can you tell us about like all your side hustles?
Oh boy. Yeah, so I really started on like Fiverr more than anything, which is a self-employment website. And yeah, in the beginning, I was charging $5 for voiceover projects, just trying to get some experience, try to make any money I can. And I mean, I think there's so many pros to being self-employed. Like it's been super flexible. I've learned how to be a business person, but the con is that the money has been so inconsistent. Everything's online, so you're never meeting people face to face. So sometimes it's hard to communicate with someone who you've never met. And also, I would say just like the pros and cons of being self-employed is you don't have a boss. So you don't have someone telling you like, go to work. I just have to wake up in the morning and be like, all right, I have to work so I make money. So you have to be very motivated to be self-employed. And so I've been doing this for 3 years now, and I felt the pros and cons a lot. I wouldn't say there's like no reason to have a normal job, because there's plenty of pros to having a normal job. You just have to decide what kind of life you want to live. If you want that freedom of being self-employed, you're just going to have to be someone who's okay with really inconsistent money and being super self-motivated.
Yeah, and I think that the longer you kind of ride that self-employment wave, the cons do turn into pros. Like in the beginning, the con might be, okay, I don't have a boss, so I'm not accountable, so I don't know how to organize myself yet, or I find myself being lazy or I don't know, just not on top of my work. But as you get in the groove and you realize, okay, the self-employment thing can make me money, but I have to work hard and I have to, put some effort in. Down the road, once you've gotten in the groove, not having a boss actually becomes a pro, because then you realize, okay, I know how to do this for myself. I don't need anybody telling me what to do. And now I'm flexible, and you kind of learn how much you actually need to do in order to, be successful at your job.
Totally. And like, I guess on like a personal level being self-employed is like, it can be a little lonely as a con, but then at other times that was a pro because with everything going on now, everyone has to work from home. So I was already used to it. And of course, I can get my socializing in other ways other than at work. I don't know. Do you ever feel a little bit like lonely or wish that you had coworkers through all of this?
Yeah, that is something I definitely think about, especially because at least with the type of work I do, I tend to work into the evening, like, and what a normal person might be done at 4 or 5. Sometimes I don't get done till 7 or 8 or even later. And so all of my friends are like out at a happy hour with their coworkers. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm my own boss. I have no employees and I'm by myself at my computer and I can't even go to happy hour. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. Yeah, that's the other thing with being self-employed is like when work is never really done for us. There's always clients who are going to be emailing us and weekends kind of exist but kind of don't exist.
Yeah, in time I've learned to put boundaries on those sorts of things. Like one of the best pieces of advices I ever pieces of advices. Wow. One of the best pieces of advice that I ever received as a self-employed person is to put business hours on yourself. If you are your own business, you need to let your clients know, "Hey, I'm only reachable Monday through Friday from 8 to 5."
Mm-hmm.
Or whatever the case may be. That way, if they send you an email at 9 p.m., they're not surprised when they don't have an answer the
Mm-hmm.
next morning. And that has really made a big difference. I mean, I'm not going to lie, in quarantine, especially when I've been bored and just home by myself, I have found myself working sometimes until midnight or even later
Mm-hmm.
just because I have nothing else to do and work is fun for me. I'm passionate about what I do. But when I'm really in the thick of things and I'm teaching and I'm in rehearsals and I'm trying to have a social life, when I see an email from a client, it's very tempting for me to answer it, and that puts a whole new layer of stress on my
Mm-hmm.
day because now I'm trying to multitask and my client doesn't need an answer right away. If it's an emergency, they'll find a way to get in touch with me. But I found that putting some business hours on my business has been really useful.
Totally, because neither of what we do is life or death, which is great. Like I've thought throughout this whole thing too, like I'm so grateful for nurses and doctors, but like that was not for me. Like I always want to be like quick to respond to clients, but it's not life or death. And like I think everyone needs to be better about just like having some work-life balance and like answering people in an appropriate time, but like your entire life can't be work.
Yeah. That's a hard lesson to learn. That is one of those cons can become a pro or pros can become a con if you're not careful. But it's all a balancing act, and you're not going to get it right on the first day, especially if you're listening to this and wanting to kind of start your own thing and you've never had your own business before. You're not going to know the answers, and you're not going to know what that balance looks like for you for maybe quite some time, and that's okay. You'll figure it out as you go.
Yeah, and I think we're both still working on ours.
Yeah. I mean, lifelong learning, right? We're
Yeah,
never done. We're never done learning. We're never done figuring it out, one day at a time.
totally.
So I love the conversation that we had on my podcast about traveling the world. And you were saying that traveling is one of your passions. And it's a passion of mine too. And something that I don't do enough simply because I am a workaholic.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time, my business is becoming mobile. And this idea that I can work from anywhere is super exciting. So, since you actually have experience working from anywhere, can you tell us about that?
Sure. So, again, what I do is I record voiceover and I edit podcasts. And for both of those things, all I need is my mic, and that fits in a carry on, and my laptop. So what I did last summer is I live in New York City. It's really hot in August. And I was like, I need to travel. I need to go to Europe. I feel like I was like waiting for the right time or the right person to go with. And I was like, I'm going to go solo and I'm going to work while I'm there. And so I went to London where I got an Airbnb so that I could still do voiceover. And then I went to Amsterdam and Paris where I stayed in hostels. And for the second half of the trip, when I was in hostels, I paused and I wasn't taking any more voiceover gigs. I did get like one, and I did it like in the hostel bunk bed when like all the girls were gone. It was like 1 o'clock and they all got lunch. I was like, oh, I'll meet y'all there. And then I like quickly recorded a voicemail. But, it's not ideal to be working on vacation. But on the other hand, it means that I can afford to travel the world. And so my goal, not this year because of everything that's going on, but next year is to hopefully for like 2 to 3 months, take my laptop, take my mic, travel the world. And I just have to make sure that I have internet. And if I'm going to be recording voiceover, I need to make sure there is like a closet or a comforter that I can like record under. So that's kind of my big vision of like travel and be able to afford it, is to keep working.
Yeah. I mean, the nice thing about being mobile is you have the flexibility to work from anywhere, but by no means are we suggesting, hey, you should be working on your vacation. It's
Yeah.
almost just like you schedule your vacation where you're not working like normal, but this is for if there's 52 weeks, is it 52 weeks in the year, right? 52? Yeah, 50. I was like, I think that's right. 52 weeks in the year, and the average American takes what, 2 weeks of vacation. So plan to take your 2 weeks of vacation, or maybe more, but plan to take your 2 weeks of vacation without working. But what if there's 2 other weeks during the year that like you could just use a little bit of a break and you have a little bit of a lighter workload? The fact that you can just take it and do it from anywhere. I mean, I did this the first week of quarantine because this was the first time that my business had gone completely mobile. It was actually, it was right pre-quarantine. It was like the beginning of March when things were starting to happen. And I had a trip planned and I knew that the trip was going to be canceled. And so I got an Airbnb in Hilton Head, South Carolina. And I drove down there, and I was down there for, I think, 5 days. And I taught all of my lessons from my oceanfront balcony.
It's so nice.
It was so incredible and beautiful and just made me so happy. And I would have been working anyway. So I had two options: work from home, knowing I was about to be quarantined for God knows how long, or work from the beach. I mean, it seems like kind of an obvious solution.
And then you probably worked for like a couple hours a day, and then the rest of it sit with a drink by the beach.
Oh, yeah, exactly. I mean, and I think there was maybe 1 or 2 days where I did a full work day, but my work day was like, I don't know, 11 to 6. So I still spent some time on the beach in the morning, went on a walk, bought some local seafood, was cooking. Like, I felt like I was really on vacation, even though I was working. Just being able to change up my scenery was really nice.
Yeah, and I think last time you were telling me that since your business is on its way to be fully remote, that you're thinking of moving somewhere new for a year and then eventually moving to New York City. Have you been thinking about that more recently?
I have been. So if you can't tell, my apartment behind me is a complete mess because I am moving this weekend in with my mom. Hey, Mom, I know you're listening. I'm gonna spend some time with family for the next, I don't know how long, probably the next couple of months. Just because with quarantine and everything, it doesn't necessarily make sense to pick up all my stuff and move somewhere brand new where I don't know anybody. It might be, kind of hard to meet people. And if we get quarantined again, I don't know that it makes sense to pay rent in like a totally new town. But my thought in general is, yes, I would love to spend kind of a year somewhere nice and warm and relaxing. I was thinking about Charleston, somewhere I can be at the beach. And after maybe a year-long lease or so and some time to rejuvenate, then maybe it'll be time to pick up and move to New York. So that it's in the plans. It's in the plans. I mean, New York has always kind of been in my mind as a thought of a place I could go. I've lived there maybe 3 different summers now, just doing like some singing work or some summer programs and stuff like that. And I really like living in New York, but I also really like paying off my student loans. And so the idea of like moving somewhere a little cheap and relaxing and warm just to continue to kind of pay down that debt, that seems real nice.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I think so. So let's talk about our clients. how we find them and how we deal with them. No, I shouldn't say deal with them. How we work with them. We love our clients. I am sure that some of my students are listening right now. Love you guys. Um, so I want to just share like a little tip that I don't think it's like a hot take or a secret, but it's been like a game changer for my business. And that is having a Google ad. A Google ad has literally changed the trajectory of my business. Yeah, Katie's like, write that down. Seriously, it's like, this is not a secret. I don't think. I'm pretty sure Google ads are something that all big corporations use, especially since Google is just the search engine that, most people are using. So the nice thing about a Google ad is you set it up, and I actually have it set up to go to this little Google site. It's not anything fancy. It's like a one-page thing that has a little bit of an about me. And it's like, if you want to know more, click here. And then the click here takes you to my actual website. So somebody can go from the ad to my Google site to my regular site. But the nice thing about the Google ad is you can set it to whatever you want. I mean, you could pay $10 a month. You could pay $5,000 a month, whatever you feel you need for your business. But when I started it out, I think I set my budget to like $120 a month. And I was like, I'll just kind of see how this works for me, see how it pans out, and then I'll go from there. And I am not even kidding. I have not touched that ad. I don't even know what it says. I haven't touched it in like 4 years. And the ad that I have generates me multiple leads a week. I mean, so many people coming to me that there's no possible way that I could ever work with all of them. And the thing about it is sometimes it's people who I know wouldn't actually manifest into being a client. Like, I could tell that they just saw the ad and clicked and wanted to ask a quick question, and that it wouldn't pan out. But a lot of the times it does. And all I need is for one person a month to work out for it to pay itself back. And it always does. Every time. Mind blown.
My mind is blown.
So that's my hot tip on advertising. I mean, I have plenty of other things, but if you're a small business with a small budget, if you can find $100, even if you can't, $50, whatever the case may be, invest $50 in yourself a month and get yourself a Google ad.
I never knew that. I've heard of Facebook ads and Instagram ads, and I've promoted on Facebook and Instagram and gotten like one lead of like hundreds that I spent. So I just gave up on Facebook ads. But I should look into Google ads. And do you have like a really eye-catching like slogan or picture?
No, literally, they don't let you put anything. You can't post pictures. There's like keywords like that you can't use. Like you can't say like sale or discount. Like you can't use any big catchwords. Like they pretty much force you to just write exactly what you do in a really concise way. And like I said, I don't think I've touched my ad in years, but I think my ad says something like Rachel Sandler music, piano and singing lessons, flexible schedule, master's degree, maybe. I don't even know if it says that.
That is incredible. I feel like a chump with how I've found my clients now.
No, I find clients plenty of other ways. Word of mouth. I mean, especially with what I do, teaching music lessons is the bulk of my paid work. And I do a lot of music direction. And so a lot of my clients come from referrals from shows that I've worked on and things like that. But as far as me actually putting money and time into online advertising, that is the best thing I've done for myself is a Google ad.
Wow.
Yeah. So what is your story? Like what does that look like for you finding clients for voiceover? Tell us the types of voiceover work that you do.
So I mostly do voicemails. I actually had 4 voiceover projects this morning, both for wealth management companies. And it's something like, I'll try not to use the company name. It's like, hi, welcome to Flower Management Wealth. We can't get to the phone right now. Something like that. If you want to talk to James something, dial 1. So I do professional voicemail greetings, like 10 a week. I've done tons of those. I also do just like typical ads, like Facebook ads, Instagram ads. I've done a couple TV ads. This morning I did one for a golf game. Basically, it's like a golf game that you play with ping pong balls. I've done one audiobook for children, but a lot of it is voicemails and training videos and ads for the most part, and podcast intros. I do a whole bunch of, you're listening to this podcast brought to you by blah, blah, blah. So
My mind is so blown. When you do the voicemail, I'm like, you do sound like a voicemail.
I just have a very clear feminine, and I don't have any sort of like American dialect really. So I don't know.
I like when you do the Kohl's ad.
Get to Kohl's for a buy one, get one free sweater sale.
It's like it's so good. It's literally so good.
Yeah, it's my one talent that I have squeezed as much money out of as possible, pretty much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do voiceover, and then I also do podcast editing, and that's because through all the voiceover, I was like, all right, I'm done with babysitting. I'm done with catering. I need to make money online and only make money online. So I was like, all right, I'll do voiceover and I'll raise my prices, and I'll also start offering podcast editing. So now it's really 50-50. I do a lot of podcast editing. I do a lot of voiceover. And when I first started off, I started off on voices.com, Voice Bunny, and Fiverr. And Fiverr is the one that blew up. I'm a Fiverr top seller. I have a Fiverr talent manager, and Fiverr's done really well. If it weren't for Fiverr, I wouldn't be able to afford to live in New York City. I wouldn't have been able to pay off my student loans. And for Fiverr, the good thing is I don't have to audition. People just find my gig. And the only thing is that Fiverr takes 20%. And so I've been trying to find clients on my own. And I do have a few clients who I found on Facebook, Instagram, and then I have a few referrals. And then sometimes people will find me on Fiverr and be like, would you like to work outside of Fiverr? So that does happen. I guess they take 20%, but the nice thing is I don't pay for advertising. They always make sure I'll get paid. They deal with the money side of things. So there's pros and cons. That's essentially how I find clients. I would say 95% of my business is Fiverr.
Yeah. Let's talk about the working with clients piece of this, because I like what you said, how Fiverr kind of manages your money. But real quick, it can get awkward when all I want to do is teach singing, but now I'm also a business person and I have to deal with taking the money from my people because I need to live. So let's talk about that, because it is not really that intuitive in the beginning. I have found that the more I have in writing, the less people question me. So probably one of the biggest pieces of advice I have is to create some sort of contractual agreement with your clients. It doesn't even have to be anything fancy or legal, but I can't tell you how many times I've had somebody just not show up to their lesson and then just not pay me, because I would ask for them to pay and they would say well, we were sick, or, oh, we got stuck in traffic, or, oh, we just forgot, but see you next time. And people are not always super sensitive about the fact that if they don't pay you, that you're not getting paid for your time, and this is how I live, so I need to be paid. If I had $1 for every time somebody asked me what else I do for a living, I'm like, nothing. This is it. This is what I do. And so I found that having some sort of contract, my contract, I wrote it myself. It's only 3 pages long, but it basically says I have a strict 24-hour cancellation policy. If you don't show up for your lesson, you owe me. I take payment in advance and I don't do refunds. And I've put that together based on experience of things that people try to get me on. So I literally have a list of here's all of the excuses that don't count. And it includes being sick, I forgot, I'm in traffic, don't feel, whatever the case may be. I just include it all there because if somebody signs their name to it, then they're more likely to be accountable. So do you have anything like that?
Yeah, with my clients, With podcast editing, it's pretty cut and dry. And I, as well, like having everything in writing and very clear what you're getting, what I provide, what I do not provide.
Hmm.
So before we place any sort of order or agree to anything, you know how many days it's going to be, what the price is, and what you're going to be getting. And I also try to, with podcast editing, let people know like I'm an editor, but I'm not an audio wizard. If you give me really poor quality audio, I can improve it to a point, but not that much. And then with voiceover, a lot of times they'll get the voiceover and be like, oh, it doesn't sound right. I'm going to change the script. And I'm like, well, you paid me to record this script. So there's going to be an extra fee if you change this script. It's not my fault that you weren't thinking through what this was going to sound like. So I'm very clear with my voiceover clients. You pay me to record this script, then they get 2 revisions as far as like the tone goes. But you can't just be like, oh, actually, I want to change the script. Like I'll do it, but it comes with a fee.
Right. As it should, because it's your time. And if you don't tell your clients to respect your time, then they won't, unfortunately. So it's just the way of the world. I mean, the thing is, somebody's coming to you because you're the expert. And they're not the expert in what you do. So they might not realize, hey, changing the script means that I have to redo all of this stuff. Like they're not thinking that way. So it's your job to tell them how to think.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as far as money goes, let's talk about price negotiations here. I'm going to change up the color for this one.
Ooh.
Just for fun, a little spice. So negotiating prices, I think this is probably a little bit more applicable to what you're doing on a daily basis than it is to mine, because at this point, my lesson prices are pretty much set in stone. Now, there have been times for me that during a normal school year, my regular business hours are more or less like 1 or 2 p.m. until 8 p.m. So the mornings I usually have pretty open. So I have made exceptions for kids who are homeschool who could maybe come at my business hours that are not busy hours where I wouldn't have been working anyway. If somebody says to me, "Hey, I really can't afford your price, but I can come in at a time when aren't already seeing other clients. Would you accept this reduced rate?" And if it's something fair, then, maybe I'll negotiate. But for the most part, I don't. But how does that work for you as somebody who, I'm sure every project is quite different?
Yeah, I have really clearly how much I charge for both editing and voiceover. And then people will come to me and be like, hey, can you do this for 15? And I'm like, no. But if it's for like a really good charity cause, or if it's a really, really, really tiny voiceover project, like maybe they need 10 words recorded, it depends how busy I am. I mean, my prices are set in stone, but if it's reasonable, if I have time, then I'll be negotiable. But for the most part, I try to be really clear what I charge. Something that's been coming up more and more is people are like, hey, I'm starting a podcast. Can we lump together everything in one sum and have it be all less expensive? And I usually like to not do that because it is so much work, but it really just depends how busy I am.
Yeah, I'm all for packages. I'm working with a graphic designer right now, Morgan, and she's incredible. If anyone needs a designer, I'm more than happy to send you to her. But Morgan and I have actually been working on these different package rates to accommodate my different clients' needs, because she's doing branding for a lot of my clients, and she usually charges X amount for a website and X amount for a logo and X amount for a color palette. And we're finding that my clients are kind of needing similar type things. So instead of saying, okay, it's $400 for this and $300 for this and $200 for this, it's like, okay, if you want the whole thing, we'll give you $100 off or whatever, but then you're guaranteed that business. So if you run a type of business where you are able to be flexible and package things together, you may end up actually making more of a sale.
Yeah, it's true. And because people like to feel like they're getting a good deal. And so as long as it's worth it for you time-wise, I think everything can be negotiable. But yeah, people just need to be reasonable and it has to be worth it to you.
Yeah, don't sell yourself short. Don't think if you give a discount that people are going to come to you more. Like there's a reason expensive photographers are expensive, right? And like I don't know, if I'm looking to get professional photos done, if I am looking through a list of complete strangers. Now, I'm one of the photographers who has helped me out is a friend of mine who gave me an extremely fair deal. And she's my friend, and I'm so happy to give her the business. But I'm talking if you are looking for a service, you don't know anybody in the field, and you're just Googling, right? If I see on Google that photographer A is charging $100 and photographer B is charging $3,000, I'm like, okay, well, what's the difference? And sometimes I gravitate actually toward the more expensive product because I think that it's going to be higher quality. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but at least that's my mindset.
Yeah, that's what my dad told me when I started this business. He was like, you shouldn't be charging $5 because people are going to think that you're like the Walmart voice actor. You want to be like the Neiman Marcus voice actor.
Yeah. It's totally true. And your prices can ebb and flow. And as you gain more experience, you can raise them. They don't have to be set in stone. My last podcast episode with Lee Hirschman, he was telling me that he didn't raise his prices for a decade. And he's pissed. He's pissed about it. He ended up actually eventually he started raising his prices because he thought that if he kept his prices low, that his customers would appreciate him, which everyone appreciates a good deal, right? But I think at the end of the day, his clients didn't go away. And any client who's going to leave you because you raised your price by some teeny tiny amount, like for me, every time I raise my lesson price, it's by $5. If you're going to leave me over $5, then I don't want to work with you anyway.
Totally. And it's like that with hairdressers. Like I went to a lady for a while when I lived in Texas still, and she had like a sign that was like, prices are flexible. And she was really good at what she did. So I was like, I get it. Like you get more experience, you can charge more.
Yeah, totally. So let's hop into this whole what we're doing right this moment thing, which is recording for a podcast. So let's talk about starting a podcast. You started yours well before mine, so you go first.
Sure. So I started editing podcasts, and then people were coming with me about questions about how to host a podcast, how to grow an audience. And I was like, maybe the best way to answer this question is to start a podcast myself.
Yeah.
And two, I've always thought about like starting a YouTube channel. Like I love watching YouTube, but I don't know. I can't put myself on camera as much. And I was like, you know what? This would be a really great creative outlet to just talk about things that I'm passionate about, like working for myself, moving to New York City. But if any of you go and listen to my podcast is also really just lighthearted. It's like my roommate and I drinking wine, talking about The Bachelor. And I think it's all just about building a brand, and a podcast is a really low cost, fun way to build your brand. And a lot of my clients, I feel like, don't know me super well. And so it's an easy way for me to be like, hi, I'm Katie. By the way, I have a podcast. And then they can check out my podcast and have a really good sense of like who I am. So that's kind of, I didn't have like one reason starting my podcast. I had lots of little reasons why I was like, why not? Everyone's starting a podcast anyways, and I edit them all day, every day. So I should put one out there as well.
Yeah, that's such a good point, that having a podcast is a really great way for people to just get to know you. Like if a client is uncertain if they want to work with you, because personality is everything, right? Like I don't want to work with somebody I don't like. And so if they can go to your website and see, oh, she has a podcast, and click on it, pretty instantly, they should be able to tell if they like you or not. So that it really is a good marketing tool. I didn't really even think about it like that until, I had my podcast off the ground.
Yeah, you could have potential clients listening to this and they'll be like, wow, she sounds really nice. I'm going to hire her.
Right. Like, cool. If you think I'm nice, I would love to work with you. Something I would love to say about starting a podcast, I think so many people start a podcast out of total passion, and they're like, I have this topic I really want to talk about. A podcast is a great platform. And I'm very passionate about most things that I do in my life, but a podcast was never on my radar. Like, I can't say enough that podcasting was not something I was like inherently passionate about before I started. Like, literally, when my dad came to me and said, "Hey, you should start a podcast," I said, "Why? Why would I do that?" But the more I thought about it, the more it just seemed to make sense. I on a day-to-day basis am teaching music lessons and networking with other musicians, but that didn't necessarily mean that my podcast had to be about that. Your podcast can be an extension of you, an extension of your business. It can be whatever you want it to be. But I liked this idea of aspiring artist podcast, that we can bring all artists together, not just musicians.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of developed into this thing, even within just a week of putting out there, "Hey, I have this podcast. I'm just fishing for what's the right word? Clients isn't the right word. People
Listeners?
to come on, listeners, or people to come on my show. Just looking for people to interview. And literally just through the process of that, I met so many cool and interesting people.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're thinking about starting a podcast, just do it. Just do it. I mean, what do you have to lose? You don't need anything except a microphone and the internet.
Yeah.
It's about it.
Truly, that's about it. It is, of all the things that you can start, I think it's one of the most accessible things that you can start doing.
Yeah, and honestly, no topic is too general or too specific. Like, my mom and my mom's really good friend both work in the dental industry, and her friend was telling me that she has a podcast she listens to that's just for dentists. And I don't know if it was specifically one where they were talking about COVID. I don't know if it was created to keep dentists informed during COVID, but either way, this was like the source of information for dentists during COVID. Like, what a specific podcast, right? And then there's ones like, I mean, even like yours, you said, you're like, oh, there's not really a specific topic. We drink wine and talk about The Bachelor and like what's going on in our day. So if you think that your topic is too specific, but it's probably not. If you have enough things that you can talk about. I mean, for me, when I originally was like, well, I guess I could do it on singing and vocal pedagogy, but that's really specific. But the reason I didn't want to do that is because I just didn't know that I had enough topics to talk about within that umbrella. But if you have a really specific idea and a lot to talk about, then go for it.
Yeah. And like with this specific podcast thing, like really they get specific because I edit them and like they get super specific. I mean, you have ones about like Star Wars and stuff like that, but one of the podcasts that I edit that's super specific is all about like technology and like teaching students. And he has like technology teachers on every week and they talk about like, I guess, I don't know, because I don't work in the school system, but I guess like middle schools and high schools now have like a dedicated tech teacher. And so his whole podcast is just all about tech teachers, which I didn't even really know existed.
Yeah, it's like there's podcasts on things that we just don't even know are out there in the universe.
Yeah, about professions I didn't know about and like all sorts of interesting things.
Yeah. Hey, if you're listening right now, drop in the comments some podcasts that you like, because I just feel like there's so many out there and we can all benefit from learning some podcasts. Maybe we can learn something. So let's talk a little bit about continuing education. So this is something that as a singer and a musician, I'm very passionate about. I am always in lessons and classes and things, just trying to better my skill. And I think that is one of the most important things as a freelancer, as somebody who runs your own business, is to never stop learning, because the world is constantly changing and evolving. And in order for you to be the top of your field, like, you have to know what's going on in your field. What's happening today isn't going to be happening next month, and it probably isn't going to be happening in 20 years. So continuing your education, I found, has been really, really important.
I think the internet is getting a little slow.
Oh, it is?
Now you sound fine. You sounded a little bit like a robot for a little bit.
No. Am I better now?
Yes, now you're totally fine.
Okay. Should I go back and say what I said again?
Yeah, I'm sorry. We'll
No,
edit
it's
it.
good. No, it's totally fine. I forget what I was saying. Oh, just about continuing education and this idea that whatever field you're in, if you are a business owner, an entrepreneur, whatever you are, whatever field you're in, it is constantly growing and constantly changing and constantly evolving. So if you go to school for your field and then you get a job or you start your own business in that field, that is not the end of your learning at
Mhm.
all. I mean, especially if you're going from school to starting a business, like there's a whole piece about just continuing your education and how to be a business person. Like I'm taking a social media class right now, which is something that I've never done before. But if you stop learning at school, you are doing yourself and your business and your clients a disservice.
Totally. I actually really like there's this website that gets advertised all the time and you get like your first 3 months free. I think it's called Skillshare maybe. But I've taken classes on there about growing my Instagram. I took one. Sometimes I'll take voiceover classes, even though I've been doing this for 3 years, because you just never know what other people might have to teach you. Like I'll take a beginner voice acting class here and there just to see like what they're teaching. And especially there's so many like really cheap or free ways to learn now with the internet. So I'm all about that too, continuing your education and making sure that you're up to date with all the technology because it's always changing.
Yeah. I tell my students all the time, like, I send my students to other teachers like every week
Mhm.
because I just think it's so important to have so many different perspectives. And I know a lot of them feel weird about that because they feel like they want to be loyal, which is so sweet. But I say to them, I have been taking voice lessons for 20 years. And I continue to take voice lessons every week, sometimes multiple times a week. And it just doesn't stop. And at any given point, I probably have 5 different teachers or coaches I could call up to help me. Like, learning should be lifelong, especially if you want to run your own business.
Yes. Yeah. I actually this last year got a life coach and that's been great cuz she just teaches me so much about like time management and like getting over hurdles of insecurities. So, and then as well as like like classes wise as an actor, you're kind of always supposed to be in at least one class. So, before the quarantine I was in like a weekly on-camera class.
Yeah, that's awesome. Just continuing to sharpen your skills. So important.
Yeah.
So, I love that we are both in class and in lessons and learning. I want to talk about though what you have to teach people, Katie.
Yes. So I get people all the time being like, how'd you get into voiceover? How'd you get into podcast editing? So actually, my most recent episode on Katie Talks About Podcast is how I become a voice actor. I spill it all. And then as far as how to become a podcast editor, that's something that's more visual. And so, and as well, it's a huge industry. And I think it's a great thing that people could get into. And so I want to host a webinar. I'm thinking August 15th, and it's going to be all about how to edit podcasts, how to find clients, what technology you need, and also just like starting podcasts in general.
Yeah. Who do you think? I know we had this conversation on the phone. It was super interesting. Who do you think would make a good podcast editor? Like, what do you need? What do you need to be interested in?
I think you do. Well, let me start that over. To be a podcast editor, I think you need to be somewhat tech savvy. You don't need to be like a master coder. It's not like coding or anything, but you need to have a good ear for what sounds good. And yeah, just be able to learn programs. And it's good for anyone who is really looking for something super, super flexible. And yeah, I think almost anyone could do it. It just depends if it's something that you're interested in. I'd also say like someone who already listens to a lot of podcasts would be a good podcast editor.
Yeah, I love that conversation that we had. I think it was last week. We were talking about whatever it is you're passionate about, there are probably ways to monetize it in multiple directions. So, like let's just use podcasting as the example. If you start a podcast, of course there are ways to make money from having a podcast. I mean, you can have ads and you can have sponsors and you can get clients from the podcast and things can spin out that direction. But then you can save money by doing your own editing. And then on top of that, you can make money by then teaching people how to do the thing that you do, which is edit the podcast. So I thought that was a really fun and interesting conversation that we had because I think it applies to people in any field. If you are doing something and you are successful and you are good at it, you can not only make money doing the thing that you are good at, but you can also make money teaching people to do the thing that you are good at. I wouldn't view those people as competition either. I would just look at it as an opportunity to hone in on your own skill because at the end of the day, if you're a podcast editor and you say, "Hey, I'm going to have this webinar on how to edit your own podcast," the people coming to that webinar are not the people who you are editing their podcast. There's always going to be people out there who want their podcast edited.
Mm-hmm.
So why not share your knowledge with the world? Let the people who want to edit podcasts for themselves, let them learn from you. They'll probably refer people to you anyway. The people whose podcasts you're editing, those people aren't not editing their podcast because they don't want to know how. They're not editing their podcast because they don't have time.
Yes, that's something we talked about last time as well. Is like, again, podcast editing isn't rocket science. It's all of my clients are people who have businesses, have very busy lives, and all they want to do is record a podcast, send it to someone. I even write show notes for most of them. So yeah, I honestly think it's pretty relaxing. It's more relaxing than voiceover, I think. I can kind of just sit down, have coffee, and I'm kind of forced as well to like really closely listen to their podcast episodes. So when they're interesting, that helps a lot too.
Yeah. So if people want to find out more about your webinar, where can they find that info?
Definitely follow my Instagram, Voiced by Katie.
Voiced by Katie. Perfect. And then if anyone listening is listening to Aspiring Artist Podcast and they want a cool new podcast to listen to, Katie Talks a Lot podcast is where it's at. And Katie's people, if you want to hop onto Aspiring Artist Podcast, we'd be more than happy to have you.
Yes. And does Aspiring Artist have its own Instagram, or is it just...
Nah, it's just me. So my podcast is under the umbrella of my business. My business is Rachel Sandler Music. So you can get to all of my podcast updates on my business Instagram, which is Rachel Sandler Music. You can also visit it at aspiringartistpodcast.com, which really just leads you to rachelsandlermusic.com/podcast, I think. It's all kind of under the same umbrella.
Yeah, it's funny how much we have in common because, like, I kind of wish I did what you did because now I have 3 Instagrams, which is just like almost too much. So maybe one of these days I'll make the Katie Talks Up podcast, mesh it in with Voiced by Katie.
It is so hard to keep up with all of the social media. Like, I have no idea how people do it. I just started and I'm already like, okay, I need a social media manager. I mean, I haven't done it yet, but I'm overwhelmed by, okay, remember to post on Instagram today. Remember to post a video on TikTok. Remember to, I don't know. I have a Facebook page that is linked to my Instagram page. I don't really think people see it, but it's there. It exists. But then I'm like, okay, all my friends are on my personal page, so remember to post it there. Like it's a lot.
I know. My head's going to explode right now. I have a Facebook page as well, but I'm not super into Facebook. But then people are liking my Facebook page all the time. And I'm like, how are you guys finding me? Go to Instagram. But now, lately, I'm not even that into Instagram because I'm just so into TikTok now. So now I'm on TikTok every day.
TikTok is honestly a blast.
It's a blessing.
It is. It's, I mean, you can spend so many hours. So I would love to address some of the comments that we've gotten, but they've mostly just been, hey, thanks for tuning in. So like, hi guys. Thanks for listening. This was our first, I think yours too, Katie, right? First
Yeah.
live podcast episode.
It was so fun. It was kind of scary, but it was fun.
But we did it. We didn't burn.
Yeah, we didn't burn.
We stayed alive. My mom commented, so excited to see you. Oh, thanks, Mom. I've got to put that up there for my YouTube fans. So the comments are really party of one. It's my mother, but thank you so much.
I had a friend this whole time texting me, I can't get in. I accidentally sent her the host link, and then it was too stressful to send it to her. But my friend Celine in spirit, I'm sure she was saying, "Oh man, I really wish I was there. I'm sure you're great." So thanks, Celine.
No.
You'll listen to this after.
Yeah, I know it's really complicated, but StreamYard is very cool because it allows you to fully customize and then send it out to your Facebook page and your YouTube page. I hope one day it will also let you send it out to Instagram because I feel like that's where a lot of the cool kids are.
Yeah, those Instagram lives are everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't really have much more on this topic. Do you have anything, Katie, to wrap it up?
I think we covered it all. This was super fun. Thanks for everyone who came. And then I know most people will be listening to this after it's not live. And so just thanks for being here and for listening to us.
Yeah, totally. Joint podcast was a success.
Yes, it was.
All right, live people, we're logging off.
All right.